Tony Hertz er en af klodens mest erfarne radioreklame-specialister, der har lavet prisvindende radioreklamer i mere end 35 år. Jeg er stolt af at kunne sige, at jeg i dag betragter Tony som en god ven. Ved Radio Days i København for et par år siden havde jeg fornøjelsen af at være ordstyrer på hans session. Han driver firmaet Hertz Radio, og jeg mødte ham i det studie i London, som han deler med sin tro følgesvend gennem alle årene, Monte Pythons gamle lydmand, André Shakman. Tony er på det tidspunkt netop vendt hjem fra Cannes, hvor han også havde en workshop i forbindelse med Cannes Lions. En prisuddeling, hvor radioguru, sagt i parenteser med alt mulig ydmyg beskedenhed, havde æren af at være shortlistet til en af disse prestigefyldte løver. Mit navn er Palle Bo den Stolte, og dette er Radioguru-podcast om radioreklame nummer 17. Velkommen til.
Hello, Tony.
Hello,
so nice to see you again.
And you.
How was Cannes? You went there. You just came back a few days ago.
Cannes always stimulating and interesting and exciting and tiring and it is what it is. I didn't stay for the whole week. I came back on Thursday. I did a workshop and that experience was terrific. It was I took a bit of a chance on doing something I hadn't done before. And
what was that?
Well, I did a workshop called How to Present Radio So Clients Won't Kill It. And it was all about presenting radio. And I wanted people to make it interactive. I wanted people to stand up and present radio. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I thought they're probably not going to bring their own scripts to present. So I distributed a whole bunch of scripts at the beginning of the workshop of commercials that had already been made with a little explanation. There were 5 of them. And I asked for volunteers.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, nobody volunteered. Then 2 guys from Germany volunteered to do the first one. And they just flung themselves into it. And then after that, there was one commercial that 3 people got up and did together. People had never met before. Yeah. And it was real, and the room just,
that was great.
Fell apart. So it was, from that point of view, it was really
in fact,
good.
The Germans, you had an agreement with that you paid them to be. They were hired actors.
Never met them before.
When I was on the air, that we did that trick all the time. We had someone call in just to get it going.
Of course, in fact, when I do these kind of presentation things, as you've seen me done at Radio Days and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If they say we want a question and answer thing afterwards, I say, well, we can do that, but we have to plant the first question because there's nothing worse for a speaker than to say, "Are there any questions?" and then nothing happens.
Tony, I think in fact when I was moderating your session at Radio Days, you gave me the first question. Okay, we spilled the beans here.
You need to prime the pump, as they say, to get things going.
Ja. Første gang jeg stødte på navnet Tony Hertz, var da jeg som meget ung mand sad som reklametegner-elev på et reklamebureau for omkring 26 år siden, med ambitioner om at blive en stor art director på et tidspunkt. En dag kom bureauets produktionschef forbi tegnestuen. "Er det ikke noget med, at du begyndte at lave radio?" sagde han og smed en kuvert på mit bord. Det var en rapport med et tilhørende kassettebånd, som tekstforfatter Pia Lønnerup havde lavet i forbindelse med et legat, hun havde vundet i reklamebureauernes brancheforening. Det var længe før radioreklamer blev givet fri i Danmark, men man kunne mærke, at det var på vej, så rapporten her handlede om radioreklame. Lønnerup havde været i New York og i London for at tale med nogle kloge mennesker. Heriblandt Tony Hertz, som sagde noget på båndet, der talte direkte til den unge tegner.
If you're a copywriter and you think just because you have to do a radio ad that your art director can have a day off, or that you're going to be lonely because you've got nobody to work with, think again. Some of the best people that I work with in London on radio are art directors, and that's because they think visually, they think in large concept, they think in blocks. Art directors do good radio, and they should be encouraged, and they're not as hung up on words as copywriters are.
What is the absolute worst way to present radio?
Oh, the worst way to present radio is the way that most people do it.
Send a script,
which is the emailing the script over to the client. And
why is that such a bad idea?
There's two reasons. Number one is that the client will then see it as a document. and not as a radio commercial. They will either print it out and look at it on a page, or they will look at it on a screen. But either way, they will see it as printed material and not get any sense of the radio-ness of it. That's the kind of functional reason. And the other reason, from the point of view we call it a psychological reason, or from the point of view of the relationship with the client, is that if you email any kind of creative work over and say, what do you think of this? It doesn't actually say that you're very committed to it yourself. It doesn't give the client any indication that you have any passion for it, or that you care about it, or that it's come from your very creative soul. And if you care about your work, it deserves to be presented in the best possible way.
March 2003, Saddam Hussein, interpreted by Hippo.
أيها العراقيون والغيارى في أمتنا.
I am hungry.
ومعانيها.
Extremely hungry.
النفس والأهل والولد.
It has been a long time since breakfast.
لا أريد أن أكرر ما ينبغي وما يجب.
Yes, I am very hungry indeed.
على كل الأماجد والماجدات.
The hunger gnaws at me.
مما يقتضي فعله.
I am really famished.
دفاعا عن الوطن.
And very soon the world will know the extent of my hunger.
Hunger is the root of all evil. Don't go hungry. Hippo, delicious baked munchies.
You won the Cannes Lion a couple of times, right?
No, I've never won
Really?
the Cannes Lion. And I'm still waiting to win my first Cannes Lion. What I have won that nobody else has won is both black pencil and yellow pencil and DNA. And that's pretty much of an honor. But I'm still waiting to win my first Lion. Not for want of trying, but the fact is that radio's been at Cannes for the last 5 years, and over the years, well, I guess one of the secrets to winning any awards is you have to do a lot of radio. You have to produce a volume of radio, and you get it all in there, because it won't win if you don't get it in.
No.
And because my concentration, I'm still actively producing, but I don't produce a volume of it anymore the way that I used to, because I'm doing much more teaching, and I do, 1 or 2 spots a month. So it's not a huge volume. So yeah, I just haven't been doing as much.
And you've been on the jury.
I've been on the jury.
Cannes,
I was on the first radio jury in 2005, and I was on the jury last year.
Yeah. Do you sometimes get surprised at what the other judges are voting, or do you pretty much agree?
I'll tell you something. I've been in this business now for 35 years, and I've been to God knows how many hundreds of awards things, and been on a lot of juries, and 2 things have never failed, either on a jury or at an award show. And I sit there in the jury room and say. And I look at the shortlist, I look at the things that people like. They didn't like that. About something that I feel passionate about. I don't just mean my stuff, I just mean something that I thought, well, that's definitely a winner. And other people thought didn't. And a similar emotion, they liked that over stuff that I think is just terribly ordinary. So it's always a surprise. Even last year, which was the best jury I have ever been on in my life, it was really, really super group of people, including enough radio specialists on that jury who really knew stuff. There was still this: you just simply cannot account for what other people will like and what turns other people on or turns other people off. We all agree that we're looking for a great idea. We all agree that we're looking for wonderful execution. The difference for me, having been so involved and so deeply committed to radio advertising for such a long time, is I'm looking for something that pushes the medium forward, that says, well, I haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
And that's very, very rare. And whereas most people who come from the agency side will award something that is a strong idea, beautifully written, and you see examples of it all the time winning. In fact, you see examples of it this year winning Grand Prix and gold. Strong ideas, very, very well written, But the question in the back of my mind, or the front of my mind, is, well, yeah, but haven't we seen this before? Not necessarily this particular execution, but has this moved us forward? Has this moved radio forward? You know, the respect I have for D&AD is this. In 50 years, there have only been 2 black pencils for radio. Oh. And I'm lucky enough to have one of them. And both of those moved the medium forward. Both of those did something that hadn't been done before, and they moved it forward. And I believe awards should be, I think juries should be really, really stingy with awards, particularly the top ones.
Now I'm curious, what was the black pencil that you did? That
was the Schwarzkopf, the Schwarzkopf sings operetta commercial.
You did that one?
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant work. Yeah. Let's for the listeners, let's hear it.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes, madam.
Have you got the record by that soprano?
Oh, we've got lots of records by lots of sopranos. Which one?
Oh, I can't remember her name. She's got a lovely voice.
Well, they mostly do.
She sounds sort of like 2, 3. Wen, no du, so steht ich auf meiner Träume rein. Dort, wo ich glücklich und selig bin, ist Wien, my Wien.
That was Elizabeth Schwarzkopf.
Of course, silly of me.
That was from Elizabeth Schwarzkopf Sings Operetta on HMV.
How could I have forgotten? HMV.
Yes.
Schwarzkopf Sings Operetta. I'll take it.
Will there be anything else?
We know that baritone. La 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 la.
When I play it now, I played it in Cannes.
Yeah.
In fact, somebody actually got up and I wrote it out simply as a script and said, "How would you present this commercial?"
Yeah. Interesting.
And just to see how they would do it. And this girl got up and she, and I played her a sample of the music, and she, did her best with it. And one of the reasons that I think it won the Black Pencil was it was done before the word morph existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was done on 8-track tape. Yeah. Nobody had ever done anything like that before on analog multi-track tape, and that's what I meant by pushing, trying to find something new. Nowadays, when I play the spot, it's very ironic. When I play the spot at workshops, and I love to do it, but I actually have to explain to a room full of people who have never actually bought a piece of music in a record store before, not only what it's like to go in, because maybe if you're 30 years old you might have been into HMV and picked a CD up, but now everybody's downloading, but they've never actually gone and asked somebody behind a counter for a record, and you have to explain that that's the way it used to be.
And someone who actually knew.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to explain that's the way it used to. That's why.
Yeah. And it was written on a typewriter.
And it was written. Actually, in those days, it was. I type it when I finished it, but I always wrote scripts by hand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Next.
Hello. I'd like to sing a song I wrote myself. It's called "I Want to Love You." I want to love you. Oh yes, I do. Till the stars and the moon all turn blue. Just look at me. My heart is yours. I want to love you.
Wonderful.
Wonderbra, the original.
Can you, in 3 minutes, take us through your career? Because you did some traveling as well on agencies.
Well, I did, but the beginning of the career was kind of interesting because I had absolutely in those days nobody actually got into advertising on purpose. You know? Nobody thought about getting into you were talking about Mad Men, and we're talking about that era, and everybody. I was a pre-med student at George Washington University in Washington D.C.
Yeah, because you're Anglo.
I'm Anglo-American. I grew up in Washington, and I was going to George Washington University with the plans to be and the kind of hopes to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it was really deep in my soul. As it turns out, it wasn't. It was a parent pleaser.
Yeah.
It was a parent pleaser, and I'll tell you the short long version of the story. I had a summer job at a drugstore in Washington next to the biggest advertising agency in Washington, D.C. And it was one of those old-fashioned drugstores where they sold not only all the stuff that a drugstore sells, but also they had a lunch counter and people came in to keep people. And the people from the agency came in and had lunch and they bought stuff. And I noticed two things that were really, really interesting. One was that the girls were really good-looking. And two was that the men bought an inordinate number of condoms.
I need to get into that business.
And I thought,
Okay, let's summarise. Your girlfriend disappeared between 6:10 and 6:20 p.m. She remained alone in your car at the petrol station while you went inside to pay for the petrol. This took you about 10 minutes, and when you returned to the car, she disappeared. No sign of her anywhere, no witnesses. So let's move on to a description. Okay, colour of eyes.
I don't know.
Wonderbra, the original.
and I got to know these people. At the end of the summer, I got a part-time job as a delivery messenger for this advertising agency in between classes, after school. And I used to drive things around in the company van and drive proofs around and deliver things. And after about 6 months, there's a Friday night, and I worked part-time for the production department and part-time for the guy who was the head of radio and TV in this agency. Wonderful, wonderful man who taught me a lot. And he, on a Friday night one Friday night, everybody gone home, and I was clearing up my desk, and he said, "Tony, I need you to do something for me. I've got to go because I've got to go to a dinner, but I've got this little radio commercial, and it's got to get out tonight and be delivered to the radio station by tomorrow morning because it's only on Monday." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, and it was like a 10-second tag on a pre-recorded commercial. And I spent about 4 hours doing this 10-second tag and doing it and redoing it and redoing it. Got it to the radio station, and the following week drove around in the van, and I heard it being broadcast on the radio. Yeah. And I thought, this is the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. And 35 years later, I still kind of do, Yeah. And that's how I got in. So then I had a couple of years in Washington. I moved up to New York, had a couple of years, and I worked for I did my first big national radio campaign for Coca-Cola in New York. Oh. And then I got transferred. I kind of blackmailed McCann, New York, into transferring me to London because I really wanted to go back to live as an adult in the UK. Yeah. Came to London just before commercial radio started, and I was basically the only guy in the UK who'd ever written a radio commercial at the time. Yeah. And when radio started in the UK, I thought, well, I'm going to do something that I know exists in New York, and I started a company called the Radio Operators, which was the first UK production company. Yeah. I did that for about 13 years, won lots of awards, made hardly any money because radio was really small business then. Swore every day I would never work for another advertising agency, certainly not McCann. Went back to work for McCann. They offered me a job in Tokyo. I had married somebody from the Pacific region, from the Philippines. I'd become a bit familiar. Got an offer of a job of creative director at McCann in Tokyo, and thought, how many times in my life am I going to get a gig like this? And I went to Tokyo for 6 years. Didn't do very much radio. They did a lot of TV and some memorable Japanese radio. Then moved to Brussels for 5 years and then moved back to the UK. And after about 2 years, it was not a great move. They were still with McCann. I started Hertz Radio, and that's the career. Went back to my true love. Yeah.
When an African elephant accelerates to the speed of sound, its skin becomes slick and slippery. Its trunk stretches out in front of it like the nose of a fighter jet. And its legs are transformed into streamlined wings. That's how it gets into your head through your ears, you see. And that is the miracle of advertising on radio.
What makes radio such a special medium for you? What
kind of three answers to that. One is the lazy man's answer, which, as I found out pretty early on, I was pretty good at it, and I thought, well, I'll do this because I'm good at it, because I found it quite easy. And but I enjoy doing it for two reasons. One is that I've always found that when I do radio, particularly for big clients or agencies, you can't get left alone. Everybody goes to the TV shoot. They'll go and look at the models and have their sandwiches and have, be in show business. And when it comes to radio, nobody comes. Occasionally somebody from the agency will come along, but I get to do what I do without being under the kind of magnifying glass you get under when you're doing TV. And the other reason is that I've done, as I said, a lot of television, and you work with a director and a lighting cameraman and a whole bunch of people, and they all input, and more often than not, the stuff that comes out at the end is better than it was when it began. But sometimes I used to look at it and say, well, I wonder if I'd have actually done it the way I really, really wanted to do it, what it would have turned out like. And in radio, 9 times out of 10, it comes out exactly the way that I wanted. Whether it's good or whether it's not so good, for me, it's a very selfish medium, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it for that.
Yeah.
Adolf Hitler, February 1933, interpreted by Hippo.
I am very hungry. Really ravenous. I can't remember lunch. It was so long ago. Boy, am I starving. Hunger is my struggle. I am really famished. I call on you to join me in mine hunger.
Hunger is the root of all evil. Don't go hungry. Hippo, delicious baked munchies.
The building we're in right now, there's a lot of Monte Python stuff around here.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
I started working in my first radio production company. I worked at I used to go to a little studio in Soho called Studio G, and there was a young assistant there whose name was André, and he was 19 years old. And he was really, really keen, and he had a little recording studio in a garden shed in his house in the suburbs. And he met, and I started working with him, and I did my first actual job with him in his garden shed. And at the same time, he met Mike Palin from the Pythons, and they did their first comedy album with him in his garden shed. And André and I have been working together, and I've been in 3 or 4 different studios with him. I've just followed him around because I just started working with him because, number one, he's incredibly good at what he does. I mean, there are not that many bad engineers these days, but we're going back now to the days of tape and all that. And André, in addition to being a really good musician, has this wonderful sense of comedy, timing, and voice production. I mean, look at the floor of the room that we're sitting in now. This is from an old barn, and he's brought this floor with him from every studio, because this room is the most incredible live room for voice work. And as it happens, in this particular building, Bill and Ben Productions upstairs, and the Bill, half of Bill and Ben is Bill Jones, Terry Jones's son. And they've just done all of the Python work. They're working on a Python film now, a Graham Chapman film. They did that. All of the Python soundtracks have been done in this studio. Terry Gilliam, as you know, is an ex-Python. Yeah. André did the sound and design for Dr. Parnassus and the rest of the thing. So the whole building is kind of... Yeah.
And André plugged in this microphone that we're using.
André actually has had his hand on this U87. This is I don't know whether this is the one. He's had these U87s for years, and I think this is probably the microphone I recorded Schwarzkopf on.
Yeah, really.
It's quite likely. I mean, the U87 has been the... we'll have to.
But you also did a radio commercial, an anti-smoking campaign.
Yes.
When was that done?
I'm embarrassed to say.
It's a long time ago, right?
To say. I actually was done in 1976. And nobody, but the interesting thing about it, and the thing that I'm proudest about, is I played this last week in Cannes. You can't tell that it was done that many years ago because the thought.
Yeah, it was one of the first anti-smoking campaigns. When wasn't it?
It was pretty early on.
Yeah.
It was pretty early.
How did that come about? Because you had a couple of pythons in there.
There was one of the. What happened was that. It's always been my habit, because André and I worked so closely together, and I've hardly ever worked anywhere else, that if I was in the studio and I knew there was a job coming up in the next week or so, I would talk to him about it and say, this is what we've got coming up. And I'd written this script for the agency, and they thought it was very funny. It's called The Department of Suicide, and it's just
very Python.
It was based. I have to be honest and say the idea for this came from the agency, and the creative director of the agency said, "I've got this idea for an anti-smoking commercial. I'm not quite sure where to go with it, but the thought is this: smoking is like killing yourself." And it's like, for guys who want to commit suicide, smoking is the best way. He said, "What can you do with it?" And I just took it and I wrote the dialogue based on that.
But did you have the characters in mind? When
I didn't have. I had characters in mind. I didn't have any particular artists in mind. I wrote it for two people, and I showed the script to André, and said, "I'm casting for this commercial." And we just talked about some names because I had absolutely no budget for anybody famous. So there was not a thought in my mind about using. And I went back to the office, and André called me the following morning, and he said, "Do you know you left the suicide script at the studio?" And I said, "Oh shit, did I really?" He said, "Yeah, it's not a problem." He said, "But interestingly, Mike was in last night to do a Python thing, and he saw the script, and he wants to do the commercial." I said, "What?" He said it's the funniest script he's ever seen, and he believes in the whole anti-smoking thing, and he wants you to call him. And I said, "Me? Call Michael Bent?" So I called Michael, who is as nice a person as you would think he is from all the stuff that you see in his travel. All this stuff. He's a genuinely nice guy. And I said, "Mike, I'm really flattered that you want to do it, but I have to tell you that I just can't imagine that we've got enough budget for you in this thing, whatever your agent's going to ask." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that. I just want to do it. How much would you normally, what would you normally pay for an actor?" And I told him. He said, "Well, I'll do it for that." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah. Can I?" He said, "The one thing is, I'd kind of like to bring somebody along to do it with." And I thought, Jesus, he's going to bring John Cleese or one of those guys. And I thought, yeah. And in the event, he turned up with a guy called Charles McEwen, who is one of his kind of writing buddies and who's written a lot of the Python stuff with him, who plays the part of the guy behind the counter in the Department of Suicide. And that's one of the highlights of my career was producing that.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to commit suicide, please.
I see. Something dramatic? We have an opening on the Forth Road Bridge.
Oh, no, I can't stand heights.
Gas ovens still very popular.
No, we're all electric.
Pity. How about a nice overdose? That's very quick and neat.
I'm not really in that much of a hurry.
Oh, why didn't you say so? I've got the very thing. Smoke.
You mean cigarettes?
Yes, and natural. Slow, expensive, unpleasant for those around you, and you can go in so many different ways.
Really?
Oh, yes. Lung cancer, throat cancer, emphysema, heart disease.
That's marvellous. Thank you very much.
All part of the service. I should warn you, though, it may take a while, and there is a possibility that you might live.
No, I'll chance it. Got a light?
Oh, yes, yeah.
I feel worse already.
I would like to talk a little bit about the difference between English radio commercials and American, because you would be the one to know, being both English and American. What do you see as the main thing that separates the two?
First of all, there's a fundamental cultural difference between England and the US, which is that Americans kind of like to be sold to, or at least they don't mind being sold to. They expect it. They expect to be pitched at. And the English, by and large, don't like to be sold to. They find salesmanship aggressive, which is why so much of English advertising is humor-based. The English attitude is kind of, entertain me, and I might consider buying something from you. The American thing is, tell me how much it is and what it's going to do, and so that's the fundamental difference between the cultures. And then when it comes to humor, American humor tends to be more direct and kind of aggressive. I mean, I think stand-up is fundamentally an American phenomenon. Is that I'm going to stand up and I'm going to make you laugh. Mm-hmm. And that's what they do. And if you look at the U.S. sitcoms and the comic stuff, and there's what happens is, we're an if we're an American sitcom, you say something funny, and then I say something funnier, and then you say something funny back at me, and it's kind of a duel, accompanied by a laugh track. So there's no doubt in anybody's mind that this is meant to be funny. The English comedy, or the essence of English comedy, and Python is a perfect example of that, is people actually not trying to be funny. It's just ridiculous situations in which people try to be dead serious. And the example that I use of that is the parrot sketch. A man takes a dead parrot back to the shop and he wants his money back and says this parrot is dead. They're not, or isn't, and he's not trying to be funny. What's funny is the situation, and it's the management of that makes the difference.
But there's a commercial that I heard you play, the Miller Lite Symposium thing. That's a ridiculous situation in an American spot,
and that proves that once in a while the Americans can actually be ironic, because it's true that the humor from that commercial doesn't come from the people trying to be funny. In fact, they're desperately trying to be serious in a ridiculous situation. So in a funny sort of a way, it's as English as any English commercial, with one very, very specific difference, which is that, and this sometimes drives me absolutely nuts, which is that there is a formula to British advertising that says you mustn't reveal the name of the sponsor until the end of the commercial. You must go through this situation, which is hopefully funny, and then pull back to reveal the thing. And going back to this cultural thing about Americans, they have no problem telling you who's paying for this right at the very beginning. So the first line of this commercial tells you that it is a symposium sponsored by Miller Lite, and that in itself is ridiculous. But the performances and the direction is wonderful.
In summary, great tasting, less filling Miller Lite is the finest light beer available today. I thank you for your time. Thank you. I will now take your questions.
Yes, I have a question. If all light beers were to suddenly come to life, which light beer would win in a fight to the death?
Are they equally matched, or do the other light beers have some sort of advanced weaponry?
No, they're evenly matched.
Miller Lite would win.
Hold on! Wait a second! What if the other light beers all had big mechanical pincher claws?
How large are the claws?
This big.
Miller Lite would still win.
Great tasting, less filling Miller Lite. Miller, good call. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
You didn't do this commercial, but you really
I wish
like
I had.
it.
I wish I had. I mean, that's, when you asked earlier what are the criteria for giving commercials awards, the ultimate criteria is you have a room full of people that you respect who say about your commercial, I wish I'd done that.
Exactly.
And that's, one of the jury chairman of the media jury said that at the other night at Cannes. She said, we all wanted to find work about which we said, God, I wish I'd done that. And that's true. Now, you just have to be able to respect the person who said it. That's all. Because and this is the the thing about some of the award stuff that I hear now and that I heard this week, which was, it's well done, beautifully executed, and I can honestly say with all my humility and envy, I wish I were up on stage collecting it, but I don't really wish I'd done that ad.
Okay, yeah, I get.
I'd like to have the recognition. I'd like to have, curiously shaped gold metal objects on my shelf as much as the next guy, but I have this peculiar way of looking at awards things now because I'm spending so much time teaching, spending so much time doing workshops. I look at awards as things that will feed the workshops. What can I use from this selection of the jury that will teach people how to do good radio?
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much.
No.
There's not that, and that's the thing. There's just not much because if I wanted to teach people about beautiful writing and production, I've got dozens of those things. And just because something is new doesn't mean to say that it's pushed anything forward,
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, it probably is an old fart's point of view, but there you go.
Not again.
Excuse me, señora. This package arrived. Yeah. The man said it was urgent.
Gracias, Maria. No.
For films that leave something to the imagination, the Miami International Film Festival.
Tell me the story of that, because there's hardly any dialogue in that.
There's more dialogue than they actually wanted in there, to be perfectly honest with you. I was in Miami to do a workshop for the Círculo Creativo, something Spanish market, this Hispanic market. And while I was there, the agency that was hosting the workshop said, we do this pro bono thing every year for the Miami International Film Festival. Would you help us do it? Because we have an idea based on the line for films that leave something to the imagination. We want to do a commercial that has absolutely no. They wanted it in two ways. They wanted to do a cinema commercial with no picture, that was only a sound design thing,
mm-hmm.
and they wanted to do a radio commercial with no words.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'd be really, really interested to do both. But then when I looked at it and I said, what's the story of this? And I sat down with the copywriter and she showed me the story, and it was a beautiful story about a woman in a tropical climate in a house with staring out of the window at a hot, muggy, steamy day, and a storm comes and the storm breaks and it begins to rain, and the woman is very, very sad, and she receives something and drops it, and it's a tragic story, and music plays a very, very important part because they wanted a solo violin to play to play the whole thing, and it was really, really moving. And I said, I think this could be beautiful, but I tell you something from experience. In my workshops, I play this game that I've been playing for years, and that is to play a piece of music and give somebody a visual clue to say, I play a piece of music and I say to half the room, this is a room. Tell me about this room. And I say to the other half of the room, another third of the room, same piece of music, this is a child playing. What kind of a child? What's she doing? And then the other half, and another third of the room, I would say, this is something to drink. What is it? The same piece of music, and you would just get this incredible variety of answers, and they will all be directed towards based on what I tell them it is. In other words, I say to them, you don't actually have to follow my direction. If I say it's something to drink and you see a room, I don't care. There's no right answers, there's no wrong answers. Invariably, people will do what they're told to do.
Yeah.
What this shows is, clearly, as everybody knows, the same piece of music will conjure up different images to everybody. But if you give them some context, they will see the image that you want them to see. Mm-hmm. What I said to the copywriter in this particular instance is, if you only give them music, if you only give them sound effects, there's no guarantee they're going to see what you want them to see.
Or see anything.
They will probably see something. Mm-hmm. But you want them to see, you have a story and you want them to see it. So we need a minimal amount of words. And the only words in there are, number one, the woman just saying something like, oh, God, not again, or something like that, just to express her mood. And then this tiny little scene where a maid brings her a package from someone who says it's urgent.
Has arrived.
Yes, and it's urgent, and the woman opens it and drops it and collapses into tears, and you don't know what's in the package. You don't know what it is, and then it ends with the line, for films that leave something to the imagination. So it's very, very definitely a movie. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing about this, though, and I used this in my presentation in my workshop last week, is that instead of writing it out as a radio script, I actually wrote it out in the format of a screenplay, of a movie screenplay, which is a different format. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to make the point to the client that this was a film. And the way things are set out on the page actually says something. Mm-hmm. So that there is a very specific way of writing film scripts.
Great things happen when you have a Twix with your tea. Cheers. Mmm. Cool. Twix for a happier pause.
In the beginning of this podcast, I played a clip that something you said 26 years ago, that you encouraged art directors to do radio because art directors think visually. I've sometimes heard the thing about doing a storyboard for radio commercials as well. Is that a good idea?
If you've got a story to tell, why not? I use them. You have to. It's not just a question of, it'll be a better presentation if I do a storyboard. I use radio storyboards occasionally. I taught it again this. I use them when there's a story with either separate scenes that I want to portray, or where I want one particular scene to be seen to be bigger. If you write something down on a script, you can't see unless you actually write, this takes 4 seconds or this takes 7 seconds. But it's not a dramatic way of showing that something is longer. Sometimes on a storyboard, I can make one frame bigger than the others, and it will show that this has more importance. Mm-hmm. So I just find it a really interesting technique, and it also, so this is on the left and this is on the right, and you can show direction of movement, and I find it interesting. The other thing that I find interesting about storyboards and other visual aids is that after the meeting and you've presented it to the client, more often than not, the client has to present it to his client.
Yeah.
And he or she is not going to go through the same song and dance that you went through.
No.
You can't expect that. So having the storyboard actually makes it easier for them to go through that internal process which so many clients have to go through now.
Yeah. Tony, we have to wrap it up. I'm so happy that you took the time to speak to me. Is there anything from what you've done that you want to play at the end here, sort of to leave us with the impression of Hertz Radio?
I would, there is. I would like to play you one of my favorite commercials from quite a long time ago. And it kind of depends on whether the person who is listening to this is old enough to remember the subject of this this commercial, and it may and it may not be, but this is a commercial that I wrote quite a long time ago, and I wrote it for she wrote it for myself to see, and I thought, this product, if I can do a commercial for this product, I can do a commercial for anything. If I can do radio for this product, I can do it for anything, and I did it, and it won me my very, very first radio award.
Watch closely. An old man is slowly, painfully climbing a creaking staircase. He slips, recovers, and continues. At the top, he unlocks a heavy wooden door and steps out into a violent storm. He struggles with all his strength against the howling wind and reaches out for his milk bottles. But there are no milk bottles. There is no storm. There is no door, no lock, no creaking staircase. There is only Marcel Marceau, the world's greatest mime artist. Without props, without sound, Marcel Marceau will entertain, will enthrall you and your family. Not seeing is believing. Marcel Marceau at Sadler's Wells, now.
I found myself played that because I still think it's conceivably the best commercial I've ever done, and that and the Brook Bond. Do you know the one with the voice, with the changing of the voice? Do you know that one? I'll play another one.
I say, could we have a bit of quiet, please? I'm going to do the Brook Bond Choicest commercial now. Thank you. It wasn't too long ago that Brook Bond Choicest was rather exclusive tea. You know, drunk by the right sort of chaps out of the right sort of cups with jolly little cucumber sandwiches and that sort of thing. Of course, times have changed quite a bit. And nowadays, Brook Bond Choicest is enjoyed by many different kinds of people who want a really fine tea, particularly on special occasions. And since Christmas is a very special occasion, Brook Bond are making a special offer, which consists of 2 quarter-pound packets of choicest tea banded together and on sale at special prices. So what you want to do is this. Nip round the shops, look for the special packs of choicest with the words special tea at a special price printed in big letters, and buy a packet. Of course, at times like these, it's nice to have a tea like Brook Bond Choicest that's a bit special, because you never know who's going to drop in, do you?
The best thing about that commercial is it's live, it's one take.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Incredible performance.
Yeah,
incredible. It wasn't meant to be. No. I said, you don't have to do this in one. You know, I'm perfect. Yeah. He said, yeah, let's try.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those 2 commercials, they're both. You know, I'm still looking for. I still have the fire in my belly, and I'm still looking for the opportunities to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And it really makes me sad to think that the stuff that I hear on radio now that's winning awards is not as good as the stuff that we were doing 30 years ago. It just simply isn't.
Som du sikkert kan fornemme, kan vi slet ikke stoppe med at snakke om de gode gamle dage.
Well, not even local, but we're talking about when I listen to.
Så vi må hellere forlade samtalen nu, inden der går for meget grumpy old men i den.
It's beautifully produced and executed, but there's just a total simplicity.
Du har lyttet til Radio Guru podcast om radioreklame nummer 17. Husk at blive ved med at abonnere, og hvis det er første gang du lytter, så kan du tegne et gratis abonnement på denne podcast via iTunes Store eller radioguru.dk. Mit navn er Palle Bo. Tak fordi du lyttede med.